Hello everyone, this is Tubasteve, and welcome to my third video for DeucesCracked.com. This video will feature me playing 2Tables of No Limit Holdem, 15-cent, 30-cent deep stacked on full tilt poker. The deep stack tables on full tilt poker allow players to buy in for 200 big blinds maximum, and the minimum buy-in is 100 big blinds, so you're always guaranteed to be playing with full stacks, at least to start, when players sit down. So we've had some requests for this video, or for a deep stack video rather, so here we go. Hopefully we'll be able to get into some good situations, and I'll be able to explain some of the differences between deep stack and normal stacked 100 big blind play. One of the biggest differences that you'll notice right away is that I'm going to be cold calling a lot more raises pre-flop with medium strength hands, such as suited connectors, suited aces. And that's because with deeper stacks, our implied odds are greater. Now, just as a reminder, implied odds is the amount of money you expect to make off of a player if you make your hand and they make a worse hand. So we're going to be calling with a lot of more speculative hands to try and stack people when they have their big pairs, and also because the deeper we are, the more room we have to maneuver post-flop as far as making moves goes. An example of this is that in a lot of pots, because there's so much money behind, our opponents, and rightfully so, are going to be playing more of their hands for pot control. And they might be scared of playing really large pots with their medium strength hands, such as middle pairs. So against the right players, we might try to do a little bit more bluffing than normal. Here we get 3-bet with a king 10 offsuit. Doesn't really matter how deep we are. Don't really want to be playing a king 10 offsuit here. It just does really poorly against his rearranging range. It's very often dominated. Even if it was suited, I would probably fold it because it just doesn't play well out of position. With deep stacks, one of the key things that you'll want to keep in mind is position matters so much more. A good example of, or I guess a corollary to this is, I believe was in White Lime's video where he talks about raising a little bit more when you're playing out of position. He mentions that when he is out of position and he's raising pre-flop, he generally makes it more than pot by 1 or 2 BBs. And the reason he says he does this is because you can eliminate your positional disadvantage by getting more of the money in pre-flop, which means the pot is bigger on the flop, so there's less money behind and less room for you to make mistakes. Well, the opposite of that is going to hold true here, is we're going to want to be playing most of our hands when we have position. And the deeper you get, the more position matters and the less your actual holding matters, as an overall rule of thumb. Here with a6 offsuit, I'm just going to complete, this is a pretty weak player that limped into the pot, so we're just going to try to see if we can hit a piece. I'm going to go ahead and make an aggressive play and lead out here with my bottom pair. It's just unlikely that anyone has flopped anything, even though it's kind of a bad board for a lot of the limping ranges there. But in such a small pot, I like to just take a stab at it. If I do get called, I have 5 outs most of the time, and since the stacks are pretty deep, well, the player that limped has less than a 100 big blind stack, but in general, I like making those little small bets, and you're going to see that a lot in my videos. A lot of extra profit can be made by just trying to pick up those small pots that nobody is very interested in. So here we have Shark Killer min raising on the turn, and this other player leading out for a min bet, so they're probably weak players. Seven 10 offsuit's a little too loose to be re-raising. Symphy here. Symphy. I'm just going to call him Symphy. I think with the 200 big blind stack, I might be more inclined to raise just because they're going to call and we're just going to be able to take it down so much of the time with a continuation bet. The good thing about having position with the deeper stacks is, if we do flop something marginal and say our opponent check calls us, with the stacks so deep, we can play our hand pretty straightforwardly on the turn and river by just giving up. Or when we do spike one of our outs, since we're deep, we stand to win. We will have a better chance of winning a large pot, at least. We don't necessarily stand a better chance to win a big pot because we're deep, because it of course depends on our opponent's range, their actual holding, and if we can extract any actual value from that. But that is one of the benefits. I'm going to go ahead and raise ace 10. Table seems pretty weak so far. Nobody's playing incredibly loose, but Waterboat over here on my direct right looks like the only player who's playing a taggy game. And my player on my left, Bloco de Barra, seems pretty bad. I'm going to c-bet this flop just because it's really dry. A lot of his range is still going to be overcards and stuff, even though his suited connectors did well on that board. But with ace 10 being out of position there, it's best to just fire and take it down. Ace queen is a standard raise, of course. Since we are deep stacked here, I'm going to be opening up a little bit out of position with things like suited hands. So you're probably going to see me raising most of my suited connectors under the gun. Whereas in a 100 big blind deep cash game, I would be less likely to do that because we don't want to be playing those hands out of position, and the stacks, aren't quite as deep, meaning we're not going to be able to win quite as big of a pot on average when we do make our hand. When you're playing deep stacked, you have to be really careful with your bigger pairs. One pair goes down in value quite a bit, especially against players that are just calling your raises, because they're going to be playing hands that are designed to stack aces. That's part of the reason a lot of people like to play deep, is so that they can use their position and speculative hands to try and outplay their opponents and to try to flop really deceptive holdings. I mean, I know that's one of the reasons that I like to play deep. So we're gonna be very cautious with our big pairs. Of course with our our medium pairs and stuff as well. And since the table isn't looking too tough, I think I'm just gonna be playing fairly passive and trying to hit a lot of big hands. Might not make for a very interesting video, but we'll see. When the stacks are so deep, I guess what I'm trying to say is that we don't need to rely on our fold equity quite as much to make playing marginal hands profitable. And we really just need to try to use our implied odds to stack fish with big hands. So that is what I'm going to try to do. We're almost 300 BBs deep with Waterboat, who's our toughest player, so could provide some interesting spots later in the video. And for the sake of entertainment and education, I'm probably going to be playing a little bit looser than normal as far as 3-betting these players in the deeper stacks, just so we can try to get into some interesting situations. Something that we're going to want to pay a lot of attention to regardless of whether we're playing deep or normal stacked, is bet sizing. And the deeper you are, the more important it is, because actions on earlier streets really set up the way the hand is going to play out later, especially with deep stacks, where it's harder to get the money all in by the turn or the river. So we really want to be careful with our flop and turn bet sizing when we're trying to decide how big of a pot we want to end up playing by the river. Here with the ace deuce, this player has checked behind on the flop, which is pretty weak, so I'm just going to fire a stab. I wasn't paying super attention, and it looks like I might have completed there with ace 2, which is a poor play if that's what I actually did. And I'm sorry, but I was probably just thinking about what I was saying. Pretty much never want to be open limping in the small blind, is a rule of thumb, so don't do it. Queen jack offsuit here is a pretty weak hand, full stacked, meaning 100 big blinds. I'm just going to be calling that full stacked. Deep, it's offsuit. I don't have a great read on water boat, so I'd be tempted to play it just because we're so deep, and his range should be pretty wide, and I'm not going to get out of control with just one pair. So maybe in the future I'll start cold calling more to try and own this guy with position later in the match, but for now I'm just going to play him a little tighter than normal, or a little tight pre-flop, maybe a little tighter than I should. Again, out of position with a weak hand, we're not going to continue against our the button player's 3-bet here. Alright, kings in a multi-way pot, it's a pretty standard c-bet here. I'm just going to fire out 2/3 pot, which is $2. It's a pretty safe board for our hand. There's not many ways that somebody could have flopped a really huge hand on this board. This is a pretty bad spot here when this new player check raises. I don't really have much information about him. We are deep, so I want to be a little bit careful. I'm just going to call. I can't fold now. It's too weak, I think. He's really only repping 4s or queen 10 or a draw, so it gets interesting here. Being deep, an overpair really kind of shrivels up. There aren't any draws on the flop that he could be two-barreling, except maybe king jack, but having 2 kings makes that less likely. So unless he has jack 9 and he's check raised and then is firing another barrel, he's going to either have queen 10 or a 4. I guess he could have ace queen. Alright, I'm going to call once, but I am going to fold if he shoves the river. Yeah, this is pretty gross. He shoved it in pretty quickly, didn't think too much. I'm just trying to piece together everything before I make my final decision. At this point, I only need to have the best hand about 27% of the time, getting a little bit better than 3-1, or get a little worse than 3-1, I'm sorry. This guy just sat down, it's readless. He check raised the flop pretty big. Yeah, I timed out, but I just don't see that being a profitable call. It's possible that the turn should be a fold. Here with ace queen, I think it's a pretty standard 3-bet. With the kings, it's pretty questionable, my turn call, I think, based on my read and based on the board texture, that he's just not bluffing too much there. At that point, maybe the way I timed down so much, I should have just folded the river. My idea, first of all, this ace queen once a guy 4-bets is pretty much worthless. Wow, this is interesting. Let's see what happens in this hand before I continue talking about the kings. Simfui had about $20 to start the hand, it looks like, so cold called a raise, and then he called the four bet cold again with ace queen. Yeah. But with the kings, what was I saying? Um, yeah, but like I was saying, there weren't too many draws for him to be semi-bluffing. And when I call the turn, I'm a little worried that my timing might have induced a few more bluffs. But when I call the turn, I really doubt that he's, especially based on the stack sizes, that on the river he's going to be trying to bluff with a whiff draw. And like I said, there's only a couple different combos of whiff draws. He could have ace queen, but the way the hand played out, I think my hand is pretty well defined as an overpair, or as at least top pair with a good kicker. So with ace queen, I'm not even sure if he plays it quite that strongly, especially since we're deep. I think I'm gonna get shown queen 10 suited or fours, maybe even pocket tens there a lot of the time. So it's always tough to make a fold like that because you don't know, but you really have to try to trust your read in those situations, and that's something that even I myself am trying to get a lot better at. Is being able to use my reads to save myself money in situations like that with overpairs. If the board had been wetter, as we say, so if there had been like a flush draw maybe, I think it would be much more correct for me to put my money in there, but given how deep we are and the texture of the board, and the fact that I really have no read on this player, and I don't want to just assume that somebody's bluffing for a huge stack without a read, I think that I made a good fold. The only problem with the way that I played my hand is that my hand is pretty underrepresented. So I just risk getting, by playing the hand the way I did, I risk folding the best hand on the river sometimes when he does have like a king queen or an ace queen. But really, there's only a couple combinations of king queen left since I have two kings. He's definitely not doing that with queen jack. So it's really just a question of, is he bluffing? You know, does he have air or does he have two pair a set? Or the rare ace queen? And I just think that most of the time it's going to be a set or two pair on the flop, the way he played the hand. So I'm going to try to start paying a little bit more attention to what my other players at the table are doing, just so I can get some more reads for you guys, and for myself, of course. Looks like table 1 might break, so I'm going to pull up the lobby on the side and maybe get on some waiting lists. I wanted to play a 40-cent, 80-cent deep table, but I couldn't get anybody to sit with me. Let's see. Yeah, there are a few games going, but none of them really look that great. Ace-King tends to play a little trickier when you're deep stacked. It's a pretty rough board, but he folds to a lot of c-bets, so I'm going to go ahead and fire. And just try to take it down. Yeah, the problem, this deep people are going to peel pretty light, so maybe it would have just been best for me to check behind and take a free card and try to get the showdown. But given his high fold to c-bet percentage, which is 75 as you can see from the stat at the top left of my heads up display here, I thought it was profitable to just try to take the pot down without risking giving any free cards, you know, to a hand like queen jack suited. Looks like I've seen a lot of limping so far, so people are playing pretty weakly. think most of the tighter regulars stay away from these weird tables and just grind out stuff like, 25 cent, 50 a dollar, and just kind of skip all the random stuff in between most of the time. So if you're ever trying to play a session and you can't find good tables, I recommend checking out these DeepStack tables. There are definitely some really bad players playing, and you should be trying to seek these players out, even if it's not your normal stake or your normal game. Alright, Queen 10 suited here. If this guy was well, if he was deep stacked with me, 200 blinds, I would probably give him a call here. But for now, I'm just going to fold the Queen 10 out of position. If I was going to make that call pre-flop, I have to be willing to make lots of moves post-flop to make up for to make the hand profitable. And I'm just not ready to do that against this player. He's pretty aggro, and he's loose so far. He doesn't fold too much. Well, he has been folding to C bets, but small sample size. I see no need to really start playing back at him yet, but I might soon, I guess, if the situation presents itself. But I'll probably wait until he, starts 3-betting me or something before I get too crazy. Especially since he has position on me. I'm going to go ahead and load up another table on the side. Looks like this Shark Killer player who's on both of my tables is also playing some more of these deep stack tables, but he's not playing with a 200 blind stack, which is pretty bizarre. Not really sure what the point is, but it's okay. On Ray on the right here, table 2, I have an interesting decision about my seat selection. Right now I have position on Waterboat, who's the only player at the table I'm really worried about, and I have the two bad players to my left. So I'm just trying to decide if I should stand up and move over across the table. The problem is the best player at the table will have position on me then, but my position will be a little bit better against the fish. I think I'm going to make the move. It's better to have the tighter players on my left anyhow, and if he starts 3-betting me light or something when I raise his blinds, I'll have position on him anyway, and playing deep stacked, I think I'll still be able to have an edge on him. And now in my new seat, I'll be able to isolate these fish more often. Preliminary read on B3CI, who's that player that made us fold the kings. Looks like he's pretty laggy, but it's only a couple orbits, so I'm just going to continue to keep my eye on him. The 8-3 here, I'm tempted to make a donk bet out into this guy, but that's just such a terrible board for his limp, or it's a great board for his limping range, but a terrible board for me because it probably hit him a lot of the time, so I'm not gonna fire. Jack 5 here, he just min bets, and I don't think that really means anything, so I'm gonna peel one off with my pair. Now that he's checked on table 2, or on table 1 rather, I'm gonna try to take it down, I think. Okay, great. And on table 2, he bets again. I just think that he could be doing that with a lot of really crappy hands that still beat mine, like a 9. Mid pair maybe. I'm just gonna give it up. He potted it, so I need to win that a third of the time. Sometimes in those little small pots, even if I don't think I'm going to win it a third of the time, I'll just call to see what he has. Because even in these little limp pots, you can kind of get a read on your opponents by just seeing what kind of hands they go to showdown with, even in the small pots. So keep that in mind. I don't really have any particular goals in mind when I'm playing. About pre-flop stats, I don't go into a session, for the most part anyway, I don't go into a session saying, oh, I want to play 18-15 today or play, 20-18 today. I usually just try to go with the flow and adapt to profitable table situations. Here with the 10-8 offsuit, I think it's just a straight value play to limp here to try to see a cheap flop. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the other table. I went ahead and opened up another table in case one of these breaks, but I have it off to the side. So I was actually explaining a hand where there were just two limpers, each had 100 big blind stacks, and I had 10-8 offsuit in the small blind, and I limped. Yeah, so I'm considering switching one of these tables out since we're not really too deep. Since we're not deep on the left-hand table, well, actually, it turns out we're not deep on my other table now either, because the other deep stack left. But I'm keeping my eye out for other deep tables, since that's the point of the video. Okay, it looks like I found a table of all players with at least $42. The small stack has $42.50, so he's got about, what, 150 blinds? A little less, so that's good. Let's take a look at the hand history for the hand that just took place on table 2, where Waterboat, our tag that we're worried, the most worried about, stacked a fish, it looks like, with a flush. So let's check out the action. Pre-flop, Waterboat raised, and the Shark Killer, our multi-tabler here, just called. So let's note that right away. Flat call queens in the blind. 15, 30, 100 BB stack. Then, on the flop, well, let's see. The flop went check call. He check called the turn, so Waterboat here, 2 barrels, flush draws on the turn into a loose passive. Well, just a loose player, I guess, so far. Hasn't really shown passive tendencies, so I don't want to note that. And back to the hand history. Then on the river, he just stacks off for his last little bit of chips. Pretty standard, I guess. Except for the pre-flop and clearly he's playing really passively on the flop. Okay, so I think I'm going to go ahead and uncheck my blinds on table 1 and then switch them out for another table that I have loaded up with pretty much 200 BB stacks from all the other players except one. 7-9 again here, especially since we're a little deep. I think it's just a solid play to limp in since it's only half a small, or I'm sorry, since it's only half of a big blind. If this flop checks around, I'll probably take a stab on the turn. This goes on an ace high board. If they don't bet it on the flop, you know, they pretty much don't have an ace. Especially now that I picked up a pair. If somebody does have an ace and they played it weakly on the flop, I pick up a couple backdoor outs. Now I'm just going to check fold it. It's not a great card. It hits a lot of his range, especially things like backdoor flush. Of course, he might raise that on the turn if he had backdoor flush draw, but you know, straight draws, two pairs. It's not a good card for me. Here with the 7-9 on the button, it's just an isolation raise here. I expect Mantles to fold a decent amount of the time since it's kind of a bigger raise, and hopefully our under the gun player will too. But if he's limping, he's probably not folding to a raise given our stack sizes. So now see, this is really just an awkward spot when Mantles bets out for the minimum. I think since I have two overcards and they might both be live, I'm just gonna make a little raise here, and then if Mantles does have a real hand and calls, I'm just not going to put any more money in. It's just a bad spot because Bloco de Barra is going to have overpairs lots of times on that board after he limp calls preflop. This min bet is just really weak from him. So like if Mantles had checked, to me, I might not have even let out there because I really expect Bloco de Barra to call with a really wide range. And with a 7-9 high, my outs are very questionable at best. But since he makes the min bet and then I'm raising overhit, that does imply a lot more strength than if it had all checked to me and I just made a standard C bet. Or maybe not a lot more, but at least enough. Where I'm going to gain a lot of fold equity against Bloco up here. Yeah, King Jack's just a standard C bet here. Table 1, gonna go ahead and close out in a second. And bring over our new deep stack table. As soon as this guy folds, or re-raises me, it's okay. A board like this is always weird when they re-raise because he's basically saying that he either has a draw, aces up, or a set of sevens. And it's hard, you know, for him to have made those hands. Much harder rather for him to have made a hand on this board than on like a 10-7-6 two-tone flop, but it's okay. King high, unless I have a real strong read that this player is doing that with air a lot, I'm just going to be folding it most of the time. Let's see, so he check raised me on the flop. Well, we're done at the table, but it's always good to keep a note for later that he check raised me on ace queen 7. I use the letters TT for two-tone, lowercase, so I don't get confused with pocket tens. Oh, and you can see my desktop there with Nicole Kidman's beautiful face. I would say sorry, but I'm really not sorry that I made you look at Nicole Kidman. Alright, so here's table Rita I just brought over. Well, you can't see the name, I guess, so it doesn't matter. But everyone is deep except for Jay Lockleg. And, you know, whatever. The point is, got more deep stacks, so hopefully we get in some situations. We got Waterboat over here again, and this time we do still have position. For 30 cents, I should have called there, I guess, with a queen, a bear queen, just to try to hit the gut shot. 30 cents is pretty cheap. We need what, like 10 or 11 to 1 to hit a gut shot, so it's, with the money in the pot, it's pretty easy to make a couple more bucks on the river if we do hit. And sometimes we'll call and hit a queen there and it'll check through and that'll be good and stuff like that, so probably not a big deal, but probably was a call that I missed when I just wasn't looking carefully. Five three suited on the button we can raise since we're a little deep. And of course, occasionally I would raise that hand anyway. I'm not gonna c-bet this flop. They know it's gonna be hard for me to have hit it too, especially Waterboat here. He hasn't check raised yet, but he might soon. Now he checks the turn pretty quickly, so. Now I just have to decide, is that $1 bet a queen or not? Because if I don't think it is, I should be raising here, and if I do, I might just want to call. I'm not really sure, and I have good odds, so I'm just going to give it a call. Try to hit my outs on the turn. So I made my hand, but that might be kind of a scare card. I think I'm going to make one pretty big raise, hoping that he has an ace or a 4 or something and is going to pay off. He's played his hand pretty weakly so far with the small bets, so I don't really expect him to have much, but I think I still have to go for it in case he's just a donk who doesn't know how to properly size his bets for value. Hopefully all you guys who are presumably small stakes players trying to improve your no limit games, hopefully you're all taking advantage of all the new features on the DeucesCracked website. I think we have at least three or four no limit hold'em geared series. Now the unconventional wisdom series is kind of advanced plays, but I think they're definitely worth checking out for you guys. Even though you're just starting out, just be careful not to use the advice, not to take the, just don't get out of hand with the moves you're making on people if you've been watching the unconventional wisdom series, because they are advanced no limit plays that are very profitable but can be overdone, and your opponents could start picking up on your moves if you're doing them too much, such as the things like shoving ace high and 3-bet pots and all that. Anyway, I'll get back to that in a second, but with pocket nines here, he min bet donks right out again like he did in the other hand. I'm just going to call this time to try to just keep the pot a little smaller one street, because I have more showdown value in this hand. I'm going to try making a weird play. I don't want to give him like too many free cards, but he could have picked up some gut shots and stuff, so I'm going to raise it up small. Because player this bad, I think there is some value. Now, we're just going to try to get to showdown with a check here. And see, that's one reason that I didn't want to just call on the flop, because I didn't want to give him a cheap look at 6 outs, and that's kind of what I was trying to make up for with my turn raise, especially since there were some possible draws now that he could have. So kind of a weird hand when they min bet like that. On the ace-ace-8 board, I thought the best play was to pot control it, and then when the turn brought some medium drawy cards, I thought it'd be best to just try to raise for a free showdown to try to get a little bit of value out of his weird airy type hands. Anyway, like I was saying, make sure you're taking advantage of all the stuff DeucesCracked has to offer. a lot of top no limit players are going to be checking out the forums, responding to the the threads about their videos. I definitely recommend checking out the Memoirs of a Limidonk series, even if you don't or have never played Limit. He really doesn't talk about Limit that much, honestly. Here, we're just going to make a pretty standard 3-bet with Ace King. It's kind of a bad spot because we're deep. And that board, he's going to like that flop a lot with the stuff that he's calling a raise with. He called pretty quickly. I think he probably has like a medium pair most of the time here where he knows he's not going to 4-bet me, and he knows that he wants to see a flop because we're deep. But I don't want to read too much into the timing tells at a 15-cent, 30-cent table. Anyway, on a flop like this, and we're deep, I think it's often best to just check fold, even though it seems weak, because I just think we're going to get floated too much on that flop. He's not folding any pair there. Or I think it's safe to assume that he's not. I don't think most players would, not just for 1-bet. I completed with the ace-3 here, which is probably like a break-even play. Now I'm just going to lead out since I have a gut shot, and just hope that these guys both missed. When I get raised, pretty much don't have any reason to call. Oh man, we just played a really big hand on a nice 200 BB pot on table 1. Waterboat is just having a great night. Got it all in with an overpair versus top, the fish flop top pair, top kicker, it looks like. Let's just bring up the hand history to make sure. Yeah, ace-jack versus kings. Probably got it all in on the flop. Let's see. J-lock min-raised, waterboat re-raised. Yep, just get it all on the flop, pretty standard, except that they're deep, so it's pretty bad for the fish, but that's why he's a fish, I guess. Too bad we couldn't get his money. With the queen 10 on such a drawy board, I like to bet the flop. Here, I'm actually going to make a small turn bet for both value and free showdown, since there are so many draws and we're playing a really fishy guy. Like I said, pretty much the play there was to bet the turn and check behind river. So that's what we're going to do. And this time he had a jack, but a lot of the time he's going to have, way worse hands considering he's a fish. Nothing really noteworthy about that hand, in my opinion. Pretty standard. 8-7. Let's see. We got the fish that might call, so we'll get to play a pot with position. Plus this guy, Rexel, he just sat at both tables. He only sat with 100 BBs, which again I think it's weird for anybody to sit at these tables if they don't plan on playing actual deep stack poker. But he's got the full tilt Iron Man logo, so he's probably a tag. So until we get some stats, we're gonna just assume he's a tag and probably just steal his blinds with the same frequency we normally would. And just all that 3-betting frequency. Just gonna assume he plays tag until we get some stats saying otherwise. Again here with 7-10, pretty weak table so far except for waterboat, and I'm just gonna go ahead and raise it up. We've been playing loose so far, but I don't see any reason to really slow down against these guys. And I know I said position matters more when you're playing deep stacked than it does when you're shorter. But against really bad players, the stack size allows you to just loosen up a lot. Okay, this is a bad board for his blind calling range, but his fold to c-bet percent is also pretty high, and we have a gut shot. And he insta-folds, so he whiffed it pretty hard. You can't be afraid to bet those kind of boards because while he is, flat calling with lots of pairs, pairs and suited connectors there, he's also flat calling with tons of garbage that Well, not that's not what I meant to say. I guess not tons of garbage, but tons of other hands that miss like Queen Jack or pocket deuces or threes. So don't be afraid to bet. You know, use your stats as a guide, as well as things like board texture. But if it's a crappy board, but the player folds to 75% of his C bets, or 75% of C bets, then yeah, take a stab. Again, I limped with ace-4 offsuit. I'll often just open fold, but when there's really bad players in the blinds, especially deep, I like to see a flop. Just because I'm pretty sure that I can outplay them. We flop the nut straight here on table 2, but there's a monotone board. Good thing is if somebody flopped a flush, we do have an out, unless they have the 5 of hearts. But for right now, we're gonna, play this hand pretty strongly until we see some bad cards. Now, I would tend to think this player would have raised with any kind of real big hand on the flop, so I'm just going to fire again. Not too worried about a full house or anything. If I get raised here, it's pretty gross, I guess, now that I think about it, but I just don't think it's going to happen very often. Alright, so 7-10. We could raise here. I'm gonna let it go just because I've been pretty laggy and I don't have any stats on the guy on the button. Let's see, I kind of want to squeeze here with a queen 10. I haven't done anything like that really over the course of the session, but being deep, it just gets grosser to try to squeeze because people are going to call you more. So, like I kind of alluded to in the beginning of the video, when we're deep stacked, I play a little bit more straightforwardly and a little bit less aggressive. But I kind of make up for that by trying to make sure I play with position and by trying to make sure that I'm playing deceptive holdings. And when I do flop a big hand, play them strongly. So all in all, it's been a pretty boring session, I guess. Haven't really played any big pots. But hopefully I've been able to provide you with a lot of good discussion about playing deep. Of course, I'm going to go ahead and uncheck my blinds now and go ahead and wrap it up. But hopefully you guys have learned something. If you guys like the deep video, I can definitely do some more. These 15 cent, 30 cent games are going all the time. So even if you're like a 1-2 player and you just want to practice your deep stack, go ahead and fire up 4 of these tables or more if you're feeling frisky and if they're running, and experiment. It's one of the best ways to get better is to experiment at lower stakes. So highly recommend trying that out. Before I wrap up, I guess I want to go ahead and just mention those video series again. I was saying the Memoirs of a Limidonk. It's a really good video series. It's good. It's a good video to have on in the background because it's mostly ST Thief, or aka Josh, talking and explaining concepts. So there's not a whole lot of visual that you really need to be watching, so it's a good type of thing to have on if you're, I don't know, doing laundry or whatever, reading forums. Good background. So that's something you guys can be doing right now. Check out the White Line versus Printy Raid, the Wilton Tilt Mathematics of No Limit Hold'em. I'm very excited to check out that series. And also, if you guys are bored, it's not too much strategy content, but the home game videos provide some interesting no limit stuff, as well as letting you guys get to know us, the producers, on DeucesCracked a little better. And we really are all about you guys. It's your site, and we are here to serve you. So let us know what you like. Me personally, feel free to let me know what kind of videos you'd like to see regarding small stakes, because I have a few things in mind, but pretty much it's up to the community. Whatever you guys want to see, I'll do. The best of my ability, at least. So anyway, I'll stop rambling. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Oh, real quick, I guess I should go over some Poker Tracker stats. Not too many big hands, so I'm just going to bring over my stats window after these last couple hands on table 1. Give you guys a quick look at Nicole. Well, you can't see her yet, but it's okay. Alright, last hand, 7-9 suited. Go ahead and raise it up under the gun. I probably would raise it no matter what at these 200 BB tables. Okay. So just real quick, I'm going to bring over, there she is. I'm going to bring over the Poker Tracker. Kind of a small viewing area, but so here, the total session, I played for a little while before I started the vid, but over 500 hands, played at about 26-21, and those aggression factors are not really that useful, but I was still c-betting pretty often. As you can see, my normal flop aggression factor is between like 4 and 5, I think. Folded a lot to steal, but I wasn't really getting any hands. Didn't play too aggressively, or let's see, I didn't win too many pots win soft flop, but most of these stats are stuff that just converge over longer periods of time. As always, for the position stats, should be much tighter in late position. But again, overall, I think you can play looser in the deep stack table environment than in normal. So from the button, where my VPIP is usually like 32-ish, maybe normally here, just playing with the normal flow of the games and not trying to play super laggy, it might be somewhere more like 34, 35. So anyway, that was our little introduction to deep stack play, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Any questions, again, feel free to post in the forum. And I'll see you guys at the tables. Good luck. Tubasteve signing off for DeucesCracked.com.